What is up? My name is Zane. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. I hope you guys are doing well. Today we're here to discuss all the books I read in September. In this month there was a lot of adjustments to be made, especially because I went back to school, so this is a shorter wrap up for me. That's a very subjective thing to say. A lot of people read either a lot of books or not a lot of books, and it changes for everyone. This month I ended up reading 5 books, and although that is not my highest number-wise, I think most, if not all of the books I will talk about today were either 4 or 5 stars, which you can't complain when you get such high ratings. All of the books I read this month were written by females, and I have a mixture of white authors as well as authors of color. I have mentioned this previously, but I'm trying to make a conscious effort to kind of look at what I'm reading and not only read stuff by white people, because we embrace diversity, and I think lifting up other people on this platform is very important. So I have a variety of books to talk about here, as well as a variety of genres and age ranges. I have middle grade books, adult books, YA, we have some romances, thrillers, fantasy books, the whole shebang. So I'm just going to go in the order that I read the books this month, because there's only 5 to talk about. There will be timestamps down below if you're looking for mini reviews specifically geared towards one of these books. So let's hop on in. The first book I read, and my favorite book of the month, has to go to Wundersmith, The Calling of Morgan Crow by Jessica Townsend. This is the second book in the Nevermore series. The first book is Nevermore, The Trials of Morgan Crow, and it is a middle grade series. Hollowpox is actually coming out at the end of this month. I cannot wait to read it. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars, and I just loved it even more than I did Nevermore. Obviously, I can't really talk about this book, but I can explain what Nevermore, the first book, is about. In the first book, The Trials of Morgan Crow, we follow a character named Morgan Crow. And in the world that she lives in, she is basically deemed a cursed child, and what that means for our main character is that she is set out to die on her 12th birthday. Now, obviously, there wouldn't be much of a book if her main character was to die like 5 pages in. So what ends up happening is that our main character, Morgan, actually ends up being whisked away by this strange man called Juniper North, and he whisks her off to the land of Nevermore. Obviously, Morgan is not an official resident of this world, and so in order to be able to stay in this world, she has to undergo the trials of the Wondrous Society, and Juniper North is actually kind of her mentor. She lives in this hotel, she meets a lot of people along the way, there are magical and whimsical elements in here, as well as a huge talking cat. It's fantastical, it's beautiful, the friendships in here and the descriptions are fantastic. These are pretty big books and they fly by. I recommend them for all age groups. I feel like everyone on BookTube who loves middle grade or wants to give it a shot starts with this series, and I understand why. This obviously follows the continuation of what happened in the first book and the results of the trials. I love Morgan Crow and all of her friends. Juniper is fantastic. I love the setting of this book as well, and overall this one I had no complaints with. I think the exploration of the world was fantastic. The mystery elements in here really did grab my attention. I think that the world is very well explained in its mystery, and you could easily understand what was happening, but we're still curious to see how it would end, and I cannot wait for book 3. I think if you guys are interested in a middle grade series, pick these up because they're so bingeable. The next book I read was Now That I've Found You by Christina Forrest, which is a YA contemporary novel that I ended up rating 4 out of 5 stars. I really loved this book. This is Christina Forrest's second book. She has written another one, which I'm blanking on. I Want to Be Where You Are was her first novel. This actually follows a main character named Evie. Evie has a grandmother who was very successful in the kind of like Hollywood scene. She was very famous, she was an actress, and our main character is kind of following her grandmother's footsteps, as in she has gone to this academy for acting and she has gotten her first major role. Now, it is a competitive world. Something ends up happening between our main character Evie and one of her friends that kind of wreaks havoc on our main character's life, and so she decides to try to enlist the help of her grandmother in order to sort things out and kind of gain her position back into the popularity of the celebrity world. However, her grandmother actually goes missing, and so our main character, as well as a boy named Milo, who is introduced in the story, go kind of on a hunt in order to track down Evie's grandmother. There are a lot of different discussions in here about kind of your place in society, societal expectations, family ties and friendships, and kind of found families and respect towards other and judgment. There's a lot that's packed into here, as well as, obviously, you may have guessed, kind of a romantic story as well. I enjoyed this so much. Objectively, there's nothing at all that is wrong with this book. It's just enjoyment level. For me, it was a 4, not a 5. I really appreciated everything in this book. Our main character was so fun to read about because she did mistakes, but she owned up to them, and she felt like a real teenager, which I really loved. The main love interest as well was absolutely lovable. He was such a sweet bean, and I really appreciate what the author of this book did, in the sense that it was kind of a healthy portrayal of a friendship / relationship where we could understand the connection. It was not forced, and there was no kind of toxic relationship. I feel like a lot in YA or new adult, sometimes it's hard to root for the love interest because he's actually an asshole, but it was not the case in this one, and I really appreciated the mystery element that kind of moved along the plot. So if you guys love good characters and a good plot, I think this is a great combination of both and would recommend. Before I switch books, I feel like I should mention, like I said in my vlog, that this is exactly what Fame, Faith, and the First Kiss was not. Like, I expected to love Fame, Faith, and the First Kiss by Casey West. I was super disappointed with that book. This is exactly the kind of book I was looking for, so if that one disappointed you, I would go for this one. Then I read a book, and starting with this book in my rating system, everything kind of changed. I read The Night Swim by Megan Golden, which is an adult thriller. It came out a few months ago. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. However, what changed within my rating is that I started using Compile, which is a reviewing system created by G at Book Roast, where every letter of the acronym stands for like characters, atmosphere, intrigue, all that stuff, and so it kind of gives you a rating out of 10 and converts it to a 1 out of 5 stars. I think I want to start using that rating system because it's kind of more objective. Obviously, no book is perfect, but you get the gist. So this did end up getting 7.57, I believe, or something close to that. This follows 2 different perspectives. We follow Rachel and Hannah. One of the main characters actually has a very famous podcast where she discusses cold cases and tries to figure out if the person convicted was actually guilty or not guilty. But for her 3rd season, this main character decides that she wants to focus on an actual ongoing investigation and court trial and not something that has actually happened before, and so she decides to drive herself to this small town where this rape trial is occurring and kind of sit through the trial and talk about it in her podcast so that people can make up their mind if the person on trial is guilty or not guilty. So obviously there are trigger warnings for rape, sexual assault. It is a pretty heavy thriller. And the other perspective is another main character who used to live in the small town that our other main character is visiting, and something terrible happened to her sister. She actually died, and everyone says that her sister died from a diving accident, like she jumped and drowned, and our main character does not believe that, and so she tries to get in contact with the owner of the podcast through letters and like really sketchy methods, if you ask me, to try to get her to help her figure out what actually happened, and that's how their stories intertwine. Now, this is not as thrilling as I thought it would be. It's more like social commentary with a slide of a thriller, because I think most of this does talk about the flaws of the justice system and how it's very hard for victims of sexual assault to come forward and testify and go through a trial, because it's hard to give more than reasonable doubt in such ways because usually it is, you know, the boy versus the girl or the boy versus the boy. Like, it can happen to anyone, but you understand what I'm saying. And there's a lot of social commentary on that and the difficulties, and I could relate to a lot of it. I have seen it, studied it, lived through it to some extent, and I think that the commentary was very valuable, but just not really thrilling. The end part of this book really did it for me. It was great. I just think that the pacing of this was a little bit off, hence the 4 out of 5 stars, and it wasn't my favorite, but I really did like the podcast element, and I love books that are taking place at the same time as a court trial. I love the law. I love studying about it. I love watching shows like Law and Order, especially Law and Order SUV. Don't get me started on that. So it was quite a fun one, but just not 100% thrilling. We are down to the final 2. Now, the next book, I didn't even know if I wanted to talk about it on my channel, to be frank, and that is Cinder and Ella by Kelly Oram. I love this book. I read it in one sitting, I tabbed the crap out of it, and I ordered the second book immediately after. However, this is an older book. It's not something I would necessarily recommend. It's just that it hits the mark for me, and objectively, I know it's not a 5-star, but I ended up giving it a 5-star anyways. We all have those books that we love, and I hate calling them guilty pleasures because you can read whatever the crap you want and none of it is bad. I think we need to be objective and kind of like see when things are unhealthy or toxic or racist or sexist and all that, but still be able to enjoy some light, fluffy books, and this is exactly that. It is light, it is fluffy, but I had such a fun time reading it. This is actually kind of like a new adult book, I would say, between YA and new adult, more new adult, and it follows 2 main characters. It follows Ella and Brian, but he is known as Cinder and she's known as Ella. This has so many of the tropes that I love. The first one being the pen pal / I don't know who I'm communicating with trope, where your 2 main characters are friends or whatever, but they don't know each other's true identities. This isn't here. As well as a celebrity regular person kind of romance, which is also in here. The story is really about our 2 main characters who bonded over the internet about this, is it books? I think they were books that were turned into like a franchise, and so both of them really have divergent opinions, and they strike up a friendship and talk about it, but they don't know who they are, and then you realize quickly, I think it's even in the synopsis, that the main character Brian is actually one of the actors that's going to play in the movie about this specific franchise of books and whatnot. And so our main character Ella actually is chatting with him and whatever, and they don't know each other's identities. Something happens where she actually loses her mother and needs to move with her father, hence the like Cinderella retelling aspect. I'm all over the place, but it's just to say that I adored this book so freaking much. For me to read a book in just a few hours, I was sitting down, I giggled, my boyfriend was looking at me like I was an alien, and I loved this book, okay? Everything that I wanted was in this. I binged this book. It was bloody fantastic. I loved the kind of plot where it took a while for them to kind of understand who they were, and the rekindling of the friendship after something in the beginning of the book happened, and just the emotions and the mushy feelings. This is a book I would bring with me everywhere. It's a book I'm going to reread all the time when I feel down. This is something I can go to. I kind of feel like this, like I do with, I don't even know if it's in the frame or not, but Listen to Your Heart by Casey West. These are just books that I as a person gravitate towards, and I'm not saying they're for everyone, but I love them, and I'm not going to talk about them much more. But just know that if you're exactly like me and you love the same things, you might want to read this one and binge it, but I know it's not the best quality book out there, okay? Don't at me, I know it. And the last book I also really loved, and that is A Girl Like Her by Talia Hibbert, which is the first book in the Ravenwood series, and this one is an adult romance. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars, and I think it also came out at 7.57 on Call Pile, just like the Night Swim did. I love Talia Hibbert, you guys. I think she's probably my favorite romance author now. She is the author of the Brown Sisters trilogy, like Get a Life, Chloe Brown, Take a Hint, Danny Brown, those books. She has written a lot of other books, including the series, and I have started it and I loved the first book. This obviously features a main character of color. It is a love story between a black woman and a white man, but more than that this is the story of a main character who is actually autistic. I was not expecting it when I went in, but she clearly states that she is autistic. A lot of people find our main character, Ruth, to be very weird. So basically what happens in the story is that we get like a prologue of someone in Ruth's family, or maybe her, I'm not spoiling anything. Someone wrecks a car and we don't really understand why, and then we go into Ruth's chapter, and then you kind of realize that ever since this incident, she has a very negative image in her town. Everybody hates her, so she just stays home and she does her own thing. She works on comics. Comics are her life. It's what she enjoys the most, and she's just secure in her house. She doesn't go out except for necessities, and she loves spending time in her pajamas. And then our main male character actually is an ex-military, and he just moved to this town. He starts working at this blacksmith shop, and they have an interaction and they end up being next door neighbors, and it's kind of like how he breaks down her defenses and tries to understand who Ruth really is, as well as kind of being conflicted about how people are portraying her and not wanting to listen to gossip about people. I really appreciated this story and the romance between both characters. This is the healthy portrayal of a relationship, because I think that the basis of this relationship was really strong and it was founded and logical, and I could really appreciate the reality of this romance. Both our main characters start out kind of wary of each other. They end up being friends, and then they stay friends for a while. And I think our main male character really does respect Ruth's boundaries. Obviously, she's not super comfortable and she has a lot of backstory, and so I think it was very interesting to see kind of like their chemistry and how their relationship developed. I think this was sweet. Our main character was adorable. I loved being in her head and kind of having an understanding of how she was a little bit different, but not in a like, I'm not like other girls trope. It was very realistic, and it was heartbreaking at the same time to see how some people really don't have an understanding about, you know, being on the spectrum and these kinds of things. And I loved the respect that our main love interest gave to our main character. He is one of my favorite love interests. He is so swoony, just like all of Talia Hibbert's heroes, love interest, whatever you want to call them. He was so respectful and hardworking and just swoony, and it was so believable. I loved the intimate scenes as well, and just overall I would really recommend this book. I want to read the rest of the series now, and I'm just really excited that I found a new companion series that I know I'm going to love. So those were all the books that I read in September. For some reason I feel like I've been talking for an hour, so I'm sorry if I went on for a long time, but I really hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments below what you read in September, or if you read any of these books, what you thought of them, and I'll see you very soon with another video. Bye guys, happy reading!